allergy issue going, so I'm sniffling a lot. So I apologize in advance for that. Well, everyone, welcome to Hillsborough River State Park. My name is Michael Castle. I've been a park ranger here for 30 years, believe it or not, and planning on retiring in September. Can't wait. Yes, I tend to volunteer from time to time. And let me get this started again. My remote, I got to get going here. Well, Michael Castle, and we're going to do a campfire program this evening, and the topic is a closer look at the park's natural resources, its animals and plant communities. And I want to tell you a story. And our story starts in the Great Depression during about 1936, when the Great Depression was in full bloom, and then President Roosevelt instituted the New Deal. And part of that was the Civilian Conservation Corps. They built parks all over the country, national parks and state parks, and thousands of roads and dams and all sorts of things. It was an effort to put all the young men to work that were suffering in the Great Depression. We came out of the Great Depression very fortunate to have 8 parks. Hillsborough River is one of them. Can anybody name another of the 8 original parks? Highland Hammock was probably the first one, or close to the first. No. Olino State Park, Myakka River, Florida Caverns, just to name a couple of them. We've now grown to a number of 160 parks, and we all have one thing in common, and that is our park mission. Make it go. Come on. Yeah. That is to provide resource-based recreation while preserving, interpreting, and restoring its natural and cultural resources. That's our mission, but our goal is to preserve examples of natural Florida. So that drives our whole thinking of how we manage the parks. That's why we don't allow you to pick wood up off the ground or tie things to the trees. We're wanting to keep it as natural as possible and or restore it to its natural condition. The Hillsborough River is the park's namesake. It's a relatively short river. It's 56 miles long. It starts in the Green Swamp, northeast of Zephyr Hills, and ends up in Tampa Bay. Right now, when there's not much rain, the flow of the river is pretty much non-existent coming out of the swamp. So what you see here comes basically from the tributary at Crystal Springs, just up by Zephyr Hills. That's where they bottle the Zephyr Hills bottled water. So they take their share of bottled water and let the rest of it flow down the river. So this is one reason it's relatively clear right now. Once it starts raining, it'll get cloudy again. It's a very popular river for canoeing and nature study. You can see otters, alligators, turtles, all sorts of things in the river. It's a beautiful place to bring your own canoes or rent our canoes here, or kayaks. The first plant community we're going to talk about is the riverine plant community. Some of the birds you see out there will be like anhingas here, perched out on a log or on the ground with his wings out, air drying his wings. This bird has no oils that, like ducks do, that repel water. And they actually dive down to fish and flap their wings to propel them through the water. But they get out of the water, they're waterlogged because they shed no water. Maybe you've seen antique pen and ink pictures of these birds sitting on an oriental person's canoe, perched up on the side. They'll have a ring around its neck tied to a light rope that it would allow the bird to dive down and catch a fish and jump back up on the canoe, but he couldn't swallow it because of the ring. So that's how one way they fished. Once they can fly, but they prefer to air dry themselves. It's a great egret is another common bird you see here. They were hunted to near extinction during the turn of the century for their plumage. It seems the fashion industry demanded all these beautiful feathers for different hats the ladies would wear mostly. The limpkin is one of the rarer birds we have along the river. You're not likely to see him because they're very well camouflaged. But if you do, try and get a picture of them, because if you're a birder and get it on your lifetime list, they're very difficult to find and see. They eat almost exclusively apple snails. Those are very large snails about the size of my fist. The little blue herring. Hi guys, welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome. It wouldn't do to be a leopard frog in this river because everybody wants to eat him. The birds, the bass, the alligators, everybody's pretty near the bottom of the food chain. If you see some lily-looking vegetation in the riverbanks in the wintertime, it's still there in green. It's the spider lily or the swamp lily. If you're canoeing down the river and you see a group of about the size of my finger of orange eggs on the side of a cypress knee, those are the apple snail eggs. Have you seen those?
Yeah.
Some of them are, one species is exotic that was very bad, and that's the bright orange ones. The pale orange ones are native. You're almost always assured to see turtles in the river. If you're looking for wildlife and you just can't find any, go to the river and you'll most likely find a turtle. Hi. The most prominent turtle in our river is the Peninsula Cooter. Right now they're leaving the river and seeking out areas of full sunlight, which incidentally, when I've seen these laying their eggs, they've been on the road shoulder within a foot of the park drive. She'll dig a hole with her rear feet just as far as she can grab a handful of dirt and pull it out. When she's got it as deep as she can, she'll deposit some eggs down there and cover up about halfway, and then lay the rest of her eggs and cover it up and pack it down. That's to predation. Raccoons come along and they smell that there's a nest there. They'll dig it up and find that top portion of eggs and think they've gotten the entire thing. So still there's some left to hatch. It takes about 60 days in the full sunlight for them to incubate. The snapping turtle. This is commonly seen in the river also. They can get very, very large, and they have very long necks. The cooters you could pick up and move out of the road if you wanted to, but I wouldn't pick one of these up, because no matter where you pick them up at, his neck is so long, he can reach around and bite you. And they don't want to let go. Very strong mouths. They clamp down and won't let go. Still in the river, we have three kinds of snakes that are common in the river. The brown water snake, the banded water snake, and the cottonmouth water moccasin. This is a brown water snake. He's non-poisonous. He's likely to be on the riverbank drying out in the sunlight. On the other hand, the black line through this snake from its nose through his eye indicates that that is the cottonmouth water moccasin. If you're unfortunate enough to be in front of him when he strikes out, you'll see a big white cottony mouth. But this is the easiest way to identify them if you see them in the river. They tend to be a little aggressive. They've been known to crawl up into boats. But we don't have an abundance of these snakes, so there's nothing to really worry about. They do bear their babies, they're live born. And when they come out of when they're first born, they're venomous as well. Maybe you've heard of tales of water skiers falling and getting bit 15 times by water moccasins. They just happen to fall into a nest of these babies that have just been hatched. Now, the alligator craves the sunlight and the heat. Most mammals can't digest their food unless it's about 85 degrees. So even if you see them out there now, they're probably not eating because they can't digest the food. The female alligator in the spring will leave the river and get up above the high water mark somewhere and dig a hole with her feet, lay her eggs, and cover it up with green vegetation. If anybody, most everybody realizes that the green grass you cut in your yard in a pile generates heat through its decomposing. Well, then there again, after 60 days, the mother alligator will hear little croaks coming from the nest. She'll open it up and take each little alligator in her mouth and carry it to the river to let it go. If she doesn't feel any movement in her mouth, she'll throw her head back and swallow it. Because a dead baby alligator is no good to anybody. Another interesting little sidebar here about the incubation of alligators. The higher temperature at which it's incubated has a lot to do with the number of males and the number of females that are born in that clutch of eggs. Like if it's from 85 to 88 degrees incubated, more males will be produced than females, and just the opposite. If you are kayaking or canoeing down the river, during the right time of season when they're all hatching out, you're likely to see a clutch of baby gators on the riverbank. Take their picture, admire them, but don't mess with them, because if you start them to croaking, ark, 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 they'll do that. They're calling mother. Mother will come swimming over pretty quick if she's in the water. So you'll want to be there when she comes. Trust me. If she can't handle it, she'll call the old man. You really don't want to be there. The largest of our gators that on record here is about 13 feet. The last time I saw that, the really big one, 13-footer, it was before we put this fence in, and the river was at flood stage, and this end of the seawall was exposed, but it was about 6 inches underwater down at that end, and that's where he was sitting, on top of the seawall. Now we're going to leave the riverine plant community and move up towards the front of the park. Pine Flatwoods. This goes back to ancient times in Florida. It survived, it was created by fire and is sustained by fire. The pine trees and the palmettos are fire tolerant. A wildfire can sweep over these and not be killed. They'll grow right back. But the little oak seedlings that have been deposited by birds over the past year or so that have gotten about this high, the fire will kill those. So healthy pine flatwoods, you're supposed to be able to see for miles through it, over the palmettos and the wiregrass. Years of suppressing wildfires allowed the oaks to grow more and more and more. And remember, our mission is to preserve and restore natural resources here. So we reintroduced fire as controlled burns in our pine flatwoods. A lot of park visitors freak out about this, and we try very hard to interpret to them why we're doing this. It's to restore the pine flatwoods. See, these oak trees you see here in the middle of that fire really aren't going to be affected by the fire itself. They've gotten to a point where the fires no longer have the effect. So we've taken to some manual removal of the hardwoods into pine flatwoods, and then treating those stumps with herbicide, and then burning them again. And we're gaining a lot of ground on that. Like at the front of the park where the ranger station sits, there's a pretty healthy pine flatwoods. And some places on one side of the park drive, all you see is a wall of oak trees. And on the other side you see evidence where we have been working on the resources. I've been here for 30 years, and it's a slow process, but it's our mission. We're going to keep at it. It doesn't take but a few, maybe a week or two, before the growth start re-emerging from the grasses and the little flowers and the palmettos. New species that may not have grown there before have a lot of full sunlight that they can take advantage of, like the passion flower and the blue-eyed grass. Remember, I'm talking about snakes, animals, and plants. The favorite hangout of the diamondback rattlesnake is the pine flatwoods. It can be found most anywhere in the park, though. This is one of the poisonous snakes we have here, diamondback rattlesnake. They used to be reports of 6-footers or even bigger, but in recent history, a 4-foot rattlesnake is a large snake. Years and years of rattlesnake roundups and have done their job on these snakes, but they're coming back. If we spot a rattlesnake in the campground or in the picnic area, we will capture it and remove it to somewhere else. But if you're out on a nature trail and you see one of these in the road, in the trail, we're not going to come move it because it will mosey on by itself. And you can stand about from here to the fire and be perfectly safe with it and take a few pictures and move on, move around him. If he's threatened, he will coil up like he is here and start rattling his tail and start staring you down, waiting for you to do something. Anybody that's been bitten by these have been messing with them. They're trying to pick them up or poke them with a stick or get them to move or something like that. When they do bite you, they have a hemotoxin. They have the long fangs, and that attacks the bloodstream and the muscle tissue. Starts destroying that tissue very quickly. It's said that you don't want to cut and suck on these wounds anymore like they did in the old days, simply because medical attention is so readily available and anti-venom is readily available. Very rarely is anybody dies from a rattlesnake bite anymore.